down the path of happiness. So the first question, this is a question that we get all the time. It's one of the biggest questions in people's minds, which is that why is this world created? And what is it anyways? So we'll talk about that. What are the characteristics? What is Maya? We hear so much. This word, I think, if I'm not mistaken, has found its way to the English dictionary. So what is Maya? Creation of this world, and then the forces of material nature. So what are the forces that are continuously acting upon us so that we can understand and we can be respectful, just like a child may not understand what gravity is, but an adult knows, and so we are able to respect that, right? So we would not, for example, jump off or throw ourselves down, right? Because we know that we're going to fall down. So to understand these forces will help us, first of all, understand what we are dealing with. Second of all, to make it work in our favor. And then finally, our journey in this world. What is this journey that we are undertaking? So this is actually, it is described, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Mamai Vamsha Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. He says that every living entity is my part and parcel. And yet they're struggling in this world since time immemorial with their mind and their senses. So why? So it is described that the living entity has eternally been coexisting with God. So this is an interesting concept in our Vedic paradigm, which is perhaps not present in the Abrahamic or the Western religious system, which is that ours is not creation. We don't say that the living entity or the soul was created at some point. We understand that the soul is sanatana, which means that it is eternally existing. So the jiva, the living entity, and God, or the supreme being, they have both eternally existed. And just like when I'm born, then my hand or my palm or my arms, they appear simultaneously as my body appears, right? It's not like a linear thing that first my body appears and then my hand appears. So in the same way, the living entity has eternally coexisted with God. But at some point, the living entity, and I think we talked about this in our previous session, the living entity has a minute free will. Why does the living entity have a minute free will? Because God is supremely independent. So we are also minutely independent. So that independence is part of our being a part and parcel of God. So with that minute independence, we can choose whether I am going to be under the spiritual energy or I want to be under material energy. And so just to backtrack a little bit, it is described that that supreme absolute truth has multifarious energy. So there is this material energy, and then there is the spiritual energy. And the living entity, and I'm just doing this as a recap, if you remember, the living entity is called the marginal energy. Marginal energy means that it is, it has a choice. It can either choose to be connected to matter or material energy, or it can choose to be connected to spiritual energy. Just as if you go to the ocean side and then you see this line, there is this line that separates the water from the beach, right? The sandy area or the dry area from the water. So that line is sometimes dry, depending on the tides. Sometimes it's covered over by water. So that's called tatashta. That's a Sanskrit word for it. It's called tatashta. So tatashta shakti, that means this is marginal energy. So now the living entity has always that perpetual choice that I want to be connected to the spiritual energy or I want to be connected to the material energy. And so the living entity at some point, for reasons that we don't understand, and we may never be able to understand why, but because it has that free will, it decides to come under the sway of this material energy, which is also considered to be illusory energy. And it is because the living entity feels that what would it be like to be God? What would it be like to be the central enjoyer, the central controller, to be the center of a universe that is where it's just me and my desires? And so because of that, So now that desire, just like darkness cannot exist in the presence of sun. So in the same way, a desire, this is a separatist desire, it cannot really be fulfilled in the spiritual realm, because the spiritual realm is characterized by one Purusha, one person who is the supreme enjoyer. And so now every living entity wants to be that supreme enjoyer. So to facilitate the desire of so many countless jivas who also want to be the supreme enjoyer, a play kitchen is created. Just like if a child goes to a mother and says, "Mom, I want to cook in the kitchen just like you." So the mother will say, "Well, I can't really give you this kitchen because there's fire and you may hurt yourself. So how about I create a play kitchen for you?" So then now we have a play kitchen for this little child who is busy cooking in this play kitchen. But as all mothers know, that the play kitchen cannot really satisfy the deepest need of the child, which is to satisfy one's hunger, because all the toys are made of plastic and they're not real food. So in the same way, Krishna creates this whole material world, which is considered to be like a play kitchen. It is not a punishment necessarily. It is a way to facilitate our deepest desires and our deepest fantasies. And so now the living entity is here and is trying to enjoy. And every living entity, and this is something that if we have ever wondered, why is it so hard to get along with each other, even within one family, between countries, between nations, communities? It's because every living entity is trying to be the master of all I survey. I want to be in control. I want the whole world to recognize the fact that there is no one better than me. And so now an example that Prabhupada, our teacher, he gives is that, say you take some pebbles and you go into this pond, and then you toss a pebble in that pond. Then you'll have some circles that will form around that pebble. Now, each center is different, right? So you have one center here, one center there. So all those circles will actually clash with each other. And so that's one reason that's given why in the material world, people are constantly clashing, because each person wants to be the center of their existence. And so as a result, there are constant clashes. So this is the analogy of a play kitchen, that the supreme person, just to honor our desire, he creates this whole world where we can try and exhaust and live out our deepest desires and our fantasies. Another analogy that is also used in the Bhagavad Gita to describe this material world is a reflection. It's my favorite analogy because there's a story. There's a story of a man, of a king actually. The story starts with a king who had a daughter. And this daughter, she had a very precious necklace that she lost. And so the king made an announcement that anybody who can find that necklace, I'm going to reward that person with great wealth. And so everybody was looking for it. And there was this one man, he was walking by and he saw some glitter in a pond. And he thought, oh my God, that is the necklace. So then he starts to wade into that pond. But as he wades into that pond, the further he goes, the further away the glitter. He can see the glitter, but he's not able to grab it. So he keeps going deeper and deeper into that pond. And very soon he's like covered in mud and weeds and it's hot and he's tired and he doesn't know what to do. But he's convinced that I can see that glitter on the water. So it's got to be something, but he's not able to grab it. Then there is a sage who's walking by, and the sage says, "My dear son, can I help you with something? It seems like you're very tired and exhausted." And this man, he gets very defensive. He thinks maybe the sage has a motive. Maybe he really just wants to get the necklace for himself. So he doesn't want to reveal what he's trying to do. But the sage is wise, and so he understands what this man is up to. So he tells this man, he says, maybe, the glitter that you are seeing is simply a reflection. And maybe the necklace is actually hanging on a branch above on a tree branch, and what you're seeing is simply a reflection. And so the man looks up, and lo and behold, there is the necklace that's hanging up in the air on the branch, and all he was trying to do was run after this reflection. So in the same way, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes this whole material world as an upside down tree. So what is a reflection? A reflection has all the attributes of the real tree. Say if you have a tree and you're seeing the reflection and all the attributes. But okay, let me open this up for you guys. Maybe you guys can share. What do you think? What is a reflection? And how, when we are seeing a reflection, what happens?
Sometimes we can take that as the truth or the real world.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes a reflection can look so real that one can just think that is the reality. Yes, because it has all the attributes of the original tree. Thank you. What else is going on in a reflection? I'll give you a little hint. If it is very windy, or
reflection may get distorted, whereas the original picture is not.
Exactly. Very quickly, right? So there is this reflection is constantly in a state of flux, depending on the movement of the water, depending on the movement of the wind. The reflection may come and go. And so Krishna describes that this material world is always, it's called Jagat. That's one name for this world. And Jagat means that which is constantly moving. And that's why we see constant change. It's not permanent. And the third thing that a reflection does not provide is that, like, for example, I may look at a reflection of an apple. It may look very real, but it does not fulfill my hunger. It does not satisfy my hunger. So this is how this world is. But there's also a fourth attribute, which is really, really important, which is that by seeing the reflection, we can get a sense of the real tree, right? So the reflection gives us a clue to the nature of the real tree. And then the fifth thing that a reflection does is, because a reflection is always a perverted reflection, right? It's always upside down. So what is of value here is not of value in the tree, right? So we'll go into that a little bit later, that it is opposite. It has the quality of being upside down, which means that it has opposite qualities. So that's a reflection. So here, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he compares this world to a banyan tree, large banyan tree, with its roots upwards and its branches below. And then he says that with the axe of knowledge, just chop that banyan tree. He says that with knowledge and detachment, one should chop this banyan tree, because this banyan tree is ever increasing. The branches expand in all directions. I don't know, in Kolkata, there are these huge banyan trees. I think it's the world's largest banyan tree, and it's like a city. So in the same way, our karma, our activities, our desires, they're unlimited, and they expand, over this universe in so many different directions. And the living entity is caught in that tree. And there are two fruits on that tree. One is a sweet fruit, and the other is a bitter fruit. And the living entity is constantly caught in trying to enjoy with either the sweet fruit or the bitter fruit, and is not satisfied, is hungry, because it's looking for the real deal. Another example that is also used is that on that same tree, there are two birds that are sitting. This is from which Upanishad is it? Katha Upanishad. There are two birds that are sitting on a tree, and one of the bird, which is the tiny jiva, is busy trying to enjoy the fruits of that tree. Sometimes it's bitter, sometimes it's sweet, and it's caught up in just trying to enjoy. And the other bird is a witness. The other bird is a friend. The other bird is a constant companion. Sometimes we talk about soulmate, right? That we are all looking for our eternal soulmate. So that other bird is actually the eternal soulmate of every living entity who's traveling with the jiva and is just waiting patiently, just waiting. That one day this bird, which is us, is going to get tired of eating these fruits and will turn towards me. And then we will be connected again. And that's the meaning of the word yoga, is to reconnect, rejoin that connection. So we already talked about this. The original tree is described as or defined as a place where God or Krishna is in the center. And this material world is characterized by this attempt to establish that I am in the center, every living, and that's called ahankar. Ahankar means, ahang means I, kara means I am the doer, I am the controller. And all our stress, all our anxiety, all our despair comes from this relentless pursuit of trying to establish ourselves as the controller and the enjoyer. And this material world is designed in such a way that it constantly frustrates that attempt. And that causes fear and that causes stress within our heart. So, so now we talked about these two energies, right? There is the spiritual energy and then there is the material energy. So the spiritual energy is characterized by the fact that it is permanent, that it is eternal, right? It's not like that reflection that comes and goes. Rather, it is eternal, and it is also full of knowledge. So it's called Sat, Chit, and Ananda, which is what we are looking for. So that energy is intrinsically or innately made of these three things. The material world is the exact opposite, just like we described, right? That it's an upside down reflection. So it is, everything here is opposite to what is there in the spiritual realm. So here it is dark, which means that there's no knowledge here. That's why every child, when he's born, he has to be taught how to read, how to write, how to learn how to walk. So knowledge is something that is acquired. It is not intrinsic. So that's, it says, it's asat, it's achit, right? There's no chit there. And asat means that it's temporary. And it's nirananda, which means that there's no intrinsic happiness here. And this is Krishna, we'll talk about this later, but Krishna characterizes this, just like in America, you want to get something organic, then that is USDA certified organic, right? So in the same way, Krishna also certifies this world as Dukhalayam Ashashvatam. So Dukhalayam means that alay means a home or a place, just like we have Vidyalaya or Granthalaya, which means a library. So as in the same way, Dukhalaya means that it's a place of misery. And it is Dukhalaya Ashashvatam. Ashashvatam means that it's temporary in nature. So now somebody might say, well, I'm just going to, okay, let me just do this and then we'll talk about that. I just hope I don't forget my train. So here, going back to that. So what does it mean for us? It means that in this world, we have to face birth, death, old age, disease, anxiety, fear. In the spiritual realm, those things are not present. So living entity is constantly in his natural condition. There's no birth, there's no death, there's no fear, no anxiety, no disease. So, and now I've forgotten that train. Anyways, I'll just continue here. So now the happiness, so somebody might say, well, I think that's a very pessimistic understanding of this world, that maybe there is happiness. And so it is not denied, that happiness in this world is actually not denied. But it is not sufficient. The living entity is described in the Vedanta as Anandamayo Abhyasat, which means that the living entity has this relentless desire for Ananda. It's made of Ananda and it wants to experience the highest limits of Ananda. So the happiness that's there in this world is compared to a drop of water. So like say a man gets lost in a desert and is really thirsty, almost dying of thirst, and somebody comes to him and gives him like a drop of water. Now, one cannot deny the fact that he did receive a drop, but that drop is not enough to satisfy the heart. It's not even enough to satisfy the throat, actually, what to speak of satisfying the heart. So that's actually how this world has been characterized, that there is happiness, but that happiness is not sufficient, and it completely does not satisfy the self. So the living entity is also sometimes described as a deer, like a musk deer. So musk deer has a special quality that it carries musk, the smell of musk in its own navel, but it's running around in the desert looking for water. And but then, it cannot find water. Even when he thinks that he has found water, which is like a mirage, he thinks that's water, but he doesn't find it, and finally he dies in exhaustion. So so that's the nature of trying to find this happiness in this world. And this is actually, this picture, this image is depicting this idea that in the old times, sometimes there would be prisoners, and they would be punished by dunking them in the water. And when they would be brought out of the water, they would go, oh, it's all good. And that's our experience of this world. You talk to somebody and they'll say, I'm okay. Okay means that I have no problem. So the absence of problem is actually defined as happiness. And that's not the standard that a living entity is. In India, sometimes they would say that independence is my birthright. This was during the independence movement. And I must have it. So in the same way, this happiness that the heart is looking for is the birthright of every living entity. And we are being shortchanged, which means that we are being promised this happiness, but what we are receiving instead is just a drop. And that drop is not enough to satisfy the living entity. And so the living entity is continuously going from place to place, trying to find that happiness. So let's see. So here is another explanation. So we're just going through all the different aspects that are given in our ancient Vedic text about what is this material world. So another way this material world is described is that it's compared to a prison house. It's compared to a prison house. The living entities, when they become rebellious, when they misuse their independence, then how is this world a prison house? It's a prison house because we are constrained. We are bound by time and space. So our bondage, for example, if I'm sitting in this room, I cannot be somewhere else. I'm constantly under the tyranny of time, right? Time is controlling. It's described that time is the, in Bhagavad Gita also, Krishna says, I am time, the great destroyer. So we are always bound. We have certain number of breaths, and our moment of death is something that is that's coming up. So in that sense, we are bound, and also we are bound by our karma. We are bound by, there's so much wealth in this world, but we have a certain quota, or we have a certain amount that we are assigned. We are all born with certain certain limitations. So in so many ways, and most of all, why is this world compared to a prison? It's very interesting because this prison, Alcatraz, there are movies made around it. I actually visited this. It was quite a stringent prison where nobody could actually escape. But this world that is created for us doesn't have any bars. There are no physical iron bars holding us down, but it's a prison of our own desires. It's a prison of our own mind, our own conceptions, and people feel that they are caged inside that. And so so that's just an interesting side point that this prison. So we talked about this material world being so many different things, right? We talked about this being a reflection. We talked about this place being a play kitchen, which means that it is also meant for our entertainment. It's meant to let us experience our desires, but it is also a correctional facility. So a correctional facility so that we can be trained to find what it is that we are truly looking for. So lifetime after lifetime, we go through different experiences, and at some point, we start to think, why am I here? Why am I here? What am I doing here? Why am I not happy here? Why does this place constantly toss me despite my best attempts? Despite the fact one of my favorite stories in the Bhagavad Purana is that of Gajendra. And this Gajendra is an elephant who has really lived the big life. He has, a big entourage. He's very powerful. He is in this amazing place where, there are beautiful waterfalls, and the demigods actually come there to sport. And he's the king of all the elephants. And yet, when he's walking one day and going to the lake to drink some water, he's caught by the crocodile. He's captured by the crocodile. So this is how this material world is constantly meant as a correctional facility for us to reflect as to who am I? Am I really part of this world of matter, or am I something which is greater? And that's the other part. And this is again a recap. We've talked about this in the past, that matter is inferior to spirit. So what that means is that this material energy is actually inferior to this jiva, or the soul, who is actually a particle of spirit. And yet the soul has handed over its power of attorney to this material world and said, yes, I agree to be bound by you. I agree to be caged in this prison of my desire. And the living entity is meant for a much greater standard of happiness, but is just happy, kind of, if you remember, there was a story of this eagle, an eagle's egg that drops into a chicken coop, and everybody says, oh, you're just meant to peck on the ground for a few grains, but actually the eagle is meant to soar in the sky. So that's what's happening to the living entity because of coming under the control of this material energy. Now I remember that point that I wanted to make. Now there are some people who also say that this, and I think many of you might have watched the movie Matrix, and sometimes there is a sense that this world is just an illusion. And the Vedic text also acknowledged that. It says that this world is an illusion. It's a dream. Sometimes it's also compared to a dream. But it is not illusion in the sense that it does not exist. It is illusion in the sense that it comes and it goes. It's temporary. It's like a bubble in the ocean, right? So a bubble exists, but it's not permanent. So a dream, a person who's experiencing a dream at night would know that it is a dream. But at the same time, one cannot say that a dream is not real. A dream also has its own identity, which is that it is a dream. What is the identity of a dream? That means that it starts and it ends. And whatever you experience in a dream, when you wake up, it does not exist. So in a dream, I may think I'm Bill Gates and that I own, properties which are, I don't know, worth whatever, billions of dollars. Or when I wake up, I'm just a pauper. I don't own that. Or, I dream that I'm being chased by a lion. And then I wake up and I realize I'm okay. I'm in my bed. I'm perfectly fine. So a dream is real in the sense that it has an identity, but at the same time, it's a dream. So the Vedas actually go a step further and they say, hey, guess what? Both your waking condition and your sleeping condition. So when you're dreaming at night, or when we're going through the rest of the day, they're both like a dream-like condition for the pure soul, which means that it does not have any lasting value. It's not permanent. And whatever we accumulate or whatever we get or we don't get, in the ultimate sense, it is just like a dream. So that's another aspect. Just like our problem, the material universe actually emanates from Lord Vishnu. Krishna says, Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo. He says that everything is actually emanating from me. And this goes back to that original point that in our understanding, the world is not necessarily a creation, it's an emanation. Emanation means what? Like you have the sun, and then the sunshine is emanating from the sun. And so Krishna says that this world is actually divine. He says, Devi hi esha gunamai mama maya durataya. He says that this material world is actually my divine energy. So then what's wrong? Why do we call it an illusion? So the problem is that the living entities, because of their desire, they look at this divine energy and they project their own fantasies and their own desire to control and enjoy matter. And so they start thinking, so like, for example, if you step outside your house at dark and you think that there's, and you step on something, you think, oh my God, that's a snake. And you become all fearful. But in the next morning, when you wake up, you realize it was not a snake. It was actually a piece of rope. So our mistaking the rope for a snake, that's the illusion. But the rope is also real and the snake is also real. So in the same way, this energy, this material energy, Maya, is not false. She is an energy of God. And in the ultimate sense, I'm going a little ahead of the game, so please bear with me. But in the ultimate sense, actually, both the energies are identical. Matter and spirit, they're identical to each other. Just like Prabhupada gives an example that an expert engineer, he can use the same electricity both for heating purpose and for cooling purpose, right? So in the same way, that same energy, when we see it from the mindset of exploitation, from the mindset of grabbing it, exploiting it, enjoying it, controlling it, enslaving it, then that same energy becomes material. But intrinsically, this energy is also divine. And it's an emanation from, in this case, it is described in the Bhagavad Purana that this energy actually emanates from Mahavishnu, who lies on the causal ocean. So just like we described that there is the spiritual realm and then there is a material realm. So the material, just like in any city, there's always a prison, but the prison is a very small part of that big city, right? It's not the big part. Typically, it's in a neighborhood, which is tucked away, right? The prisons are. So in the same way, this material world is actually compared to a cloud in the spiritual sky, which has been covered over, where only a very small percentage of living entities, people like you and I, sometimes we may feel like we are so smart, right? But we haven't really made the best decisions. I mean, the fact is that we are bound in this body of space, which is bound by space and time. So a very small percentage of living entities choose to come into this world. So that's only described as 25%. But the majority of the creation is 75%. That's actually still in the spiritual realm. All this information, by the way, is from Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavad Purana. So that's where this is described. This is a verse from the Bhagavad Gita, 9.7. It says, Sarva Bhutani Kaunteya Prakritim Yanti Mamikam Kalpakshe Punastani Kalpado Vishwajamyaham. O son of Kunti, at the end of the millennium, all material manifestations enter into my nature, and at the beginning of another millennium, by my potency, I create them again. So this is actually Carl Sagan. He actually, in one of his TV shows, he says that this idea of cyclical, coming into existence and destruction is very close to, the scientific understanding that this universe is cyclical. So in the Bhagavad Gita, this is described that everything is coming and going in cycles. So I'm going to pause here because now we are moving into a different section. And I just want to see if you guys have any comments or anything that you may have heard that you maybe want to reflect back. Yes, Matt.
Yeah, I really appreciate the different ways of looking at the material world, whether it's like the reflection or the play kitchen, the prison, the illusion, recognizing that it's divine, that it does have that spiritual component. I just think that's like a very interesting way to look at it. It gives me a lot to chew on, so I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it is such an interesting topic, actually, that there is a story from Ramayana that may actually well illustrate this point. That Ravana, who's this 10-headed demon, and Ravana, by the way, personifies lust, and his 10 heads represents unlimited lust. And so he goes to capture or kidnap Sita. But when he captures Sita, he thinks that he has captured the goddess of fortune. But instead, when he touches her, as soon as he touches her, she is no longer the goddess of fortune. She becomes Maya, or material energy. And that material energy then goes to his golden city of Lanka and destroys him completely. So same energy, if we see that energy as divine, then we use that in a mood of service. But same energy, when we see that as meant for my exploitation, then that energy becomes material. So thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? I think this taking a pause and reflection is a very important part of assimilation. It is described in Ayurveda that we are not what we eat, we are what we digest. So think of this as a moment where we're just trying to digest what we have heard so far, and this will help us really, take this knowledge, this understanding to a deeper level. So I really encourage you. No point is insignificant, even if it is a word that you heard, or a phrase, or a point. Just please share it.
You told about 75% of the world being spiritual.
Yeah.
So who lives in that spiritual world?
Very nice question, actually. Yes. So there are living entities. Actually, we are also part of that same spiritual dimension. So there are living entities just like us who are choosing to exist in their spiritual bodies, in their spiritual nature. There are countless planets that are described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, where the Supreme Person, he frolics. Like, for example, we hear about Goloka Vrindavan, we hear about Vaikuntha. So in those places, there's Lord Ramachandra, all these different incarnations of God and the unlimited incarnations. It is described in Srimad Bhagavatam that just like there are waves in an ocean, so in the same way, there are unlimited incarnations. And each of those incarnations, they have their own planet. In the spiritual realm, where the living entities in their pure state of spiritual awareness, they live together in a mode of service, and they they have exchanges just like in the material world. What is that? We talked about perverted reflections. So everything that we have in this material world, we have that in the spiritual realm also, except that it's in its pure spiritual essence. So here in the material world, we have unlimited families. We have family members, we enjoy. It is described that there are primarily 5 kinds of rasas that we enjoy in this world. Rasa means taste. What are those 5 tastes? We have, we become parents, so that's called, paternal rasa, or in Sanskrit it's called vatsalya. We have sakhya, which means friendship rasa. We want to have friendship. And we have shantya, means our relationship with our iPhone. That's shantya, right? It's a neutral relationship. Then we have dasya. Dasya means we want to serve somebody. That's dasya, servitude. And then the highest that every living entity is looking for in this world is madhurya, which means conjugal. We're all looking for a romantic relationship. So those relationships in this material world are made of plastic. And that's why it doesn't satisfy the self. If you look around, each of those relationships, even if they are perfect, they end at some point. That's, if you remember, that's the nature of a reflection. It has a beginning and it has an end. But in the spiritual realm, those same rasas exist, and the living entity gets to enjoy and relish those rasas unlimitedly without any interruption. So that's what's going on in the spiritual realm. Everyone is engaged in this exchange of rasa relationship. Does that help, Amitabh?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Himanshu, would you like to maybe share something? Geeta, Purnima. Okay, I hope you guys are there. I'll just continue. So, all right. So since I wasn't able to get you guys to speak, I'll just continue here. Okay.
Yeah, we are very much here. Just still digesting. There's so much to.
I am so glad that you're still there. Sometimes when you're speaking over Zoom, you have
Yeah.
no idea what it feels like. You know, it's like you're alone in this universe.
Yeah, you can see people's faces and reactions.
Exactly.
Thank
So-
you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, we'll just continue. So here it is. I'm just gonna, I don't know. Slide sorter. How do you do this? Okay, Loka's disappeared with me, but anyways, I'll just continue here. So now, oh yeah, I wanted to also make this other point, which is that, so Durga, right? In India, we worship Durga Devi. So another name for this material world is also called Durga. Durga means a fort. Just like the Alcatraz, it's very hard to escape. So same thing, Durga means a place from which it is very difficult to escape. And who's the controller of that Durg is Durga. So that's Durga. She's the jailer. And she's the superintendent. She's the correctional officer, and her job is really a thankless job. She's in charge of rectifying the living entities, at the same time facilitating the desires of all living entities. So we'll get into her a little bit later. But anyways, here, there are three main entities in this material universe. One is Vishnu, who is considered to be the creator. And by the way, most of us think of Lord Vishnu as one, but actually there are three Vishnus. And I always like to say that because the first time I read this, I was really taken away. I was like, wow, there are three Vishnus. And they're, quite kind of complex names: Garbhodakshai Vishnu, Karanadakshai Vishnu, and Shirodakshai Vishnu. And each Vishnu has a certain function. So think of Vishnu as Krishna in office. When he takes on this formal role of creating. So he lies on this Karana ocean and he breathes out. And when he breathes out, then all these universes come out of his body. When he breathes in, then again, we talked about the cyclical nature, right? So it all comes back into his body. And then what happens is that Lord Vishnu is lying, and then from his navel, so he generates all these universes, right? Now within each universe, he enters as Garbhodakshai Vishnu. So that was Karanadakshai Vishnu. Then he enters into each universe as Garbhodakshai Vishnu. Now, when he's lying on this, we typically see Mahavishnu lying with, Lakshmi Devi massaging his feet. And then there is a lotus stem that comes out of his navel. On that lotus stem, Lord Brahma appears. And Lord Brahma, when he appears, all around him, all he sees is just water, just darkness and water. And then he is confused and he starts to think and deliberate, who am I? Where have I come from? What am I doing here? Very intelligent questions, right? And so then he tries to find his own source by going up and down that stem. But he's unable to find his own source. And so then he hears these two syllables vibrated in the ether. Those two syllables are ta and pa. So he combines those two syllables. And when he does that, he understands. So it becomes tapa. Tapa means austerities. So then he understands that I am being directed to perform or engage in austerities. So he engages in austerities for a very, very long, long time. And when he does that, then he actually hears this flute of Krishna. And that the song that he hears is actually the Gayatri mantra. And that reveals within his own heart, Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikave, right? He's the original, all of this knowledge is revealed to him. It's downloaded within his heart. And then he becomes the secondary creator. Then he's given this intelligence of how to, so all the Lego pieces are given to him. But the template or the manual on how to put it all together is then given to Lord Brahma, and then he becomes the engineer. In India, we have lots of engineers, right? But Brahma is the original engineer. And then with that template, he puts all of these pieces together, and that's how this material world is co-created. But he's not the original creator, he's a secondary creator. And then Lord Shiva is a very interesting and a very important, a very unique personality. I'm not going to go too much into Lord Shiva unless there's a need for, but Lord Shiva is an expansion of Lord Vishnu. When Maya or material energy, Lord Vishnu doesn't directly interact with her. So that glance of Lord Vishnu is actually carried by Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva unites with Durga. That's why Lord Shiva is the husband of Durga. So Lord Shiva is also sometimes considered to be the father of this universe. But his main task is that he is the annihilator. So it is described that this whole material world, somebody might ask, I don't know if you guys have ever wondered, why does Lord Shiva get angry at the end? Right? We see him doing this whole Tandav, this dance of destruction. Why does he get angry? So again, it is described that it is because this material world has a purpose. It's not without purpose. It's not just for us to go and enjoy, which it is, very beautiful, very enjoyable, but there's a deeper purpose, which is for us to revive our original nature and go back from where we belong. I'm sure all of us who are in this call right now, we would acknowledge the fact that none of us can think that this place is our eternal home, right? Because we know we have to leave 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now. So we all know this is not our permanent home. So Lord Shiva wants us to go back to our real home. So when he sees that so many kalpas, so many yuga cycles were given to us to actually come to our senses, but we did not take advantage of it, then he gets very frustrated. And in that anger, he actually destroys this universe. So that's Vishnu, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So then Krishna says, again, this is another verse. I think I already mentioned this. Dukhalayam ashashvatam. He says, Mam upatya punarjanma dukhalayam ashashvatam napnu vanti mahatmana samsiddhim paramam gata. He says, once you attain me, these great souls, they never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries because they have attained the highest perfection. So I think I already talked about living in a Lego land. I already talked about Durga. And actually, it's interesting. This Durga, like the jailer has the power to move you up and down the cell. So in a jail, if you really please the superintendent and if you behave nicely, then the jailer may give you, maybe what is it, type A cell and a type B cell. And if you misbehave, then you can be put into solitary confinement, right? So same thing, Durga Devi has the power. And that's why in India, people approach Durga Devi for material benefit. Griham Dehi, Putram Dehi, Ye Dehi, Wo Dehi. Why? Because by approaching her, she can provide us with better facilities in this material world. But a true spiritualist is not looking for just going up and down. Brahma Bhuvana Loka. There's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita, from the topmost planet down to the lowest planet, all these places are places of misery. So real intelligence means not just going up and down like a Ferris wheel, but going to that same Durga Devi, who is also another name for Durga is Vaishnavi. Vaishnavi means one who is she's ultimately the spiritual energy of God. And her real desire, her deepest desire is that we reconnect, we revive our original nature, our original spiritual nature. She actually carries a trident in her hand. So the trident has 3 spikes, right? Every trident has 3 spikes. So those 3 spikes are represented by 3 kinds of miseries. Adhibhautika, Adhidevika, Adhyatmika, which means miseries caused by the body and mind, miseries caused by other living entities, and miseries caused by nature. And with that trident, she is pushing all the living entities and she's saying, go back, go back. This is not the place where you can find permanent happiness. So that's Durga Devi. That's her function. I think we talked about this. I think I did, right? There was a man. It's a real story. I think he passed away now. He was stuck in an airport for 18 years, and he had no place to go. Like, I think he lost his passport or something, right? And he couldn't enter the country where he was supposed to, and then the country he came from wouldn't take him back. So he was just stuck in an airport. So this is what we are doing, right? In a sense, loitering here, trying to find a place. But, we know that, this is not where we can be truly happy, or at least permanently happy. Even if we may be having a good patch and life may be giving us, everything that we ever desired, but we all know and understand that it's not a permanent situation. So I think we already talked about this. Krishna's material energy is Maya. That's one name. So that which is not. So Maya is real. Maya is not illusion in the sense that she does not exist. But she is not what we think she is. I think that's what Maya is. What do I think? I think that Maya is for my enjoyment. I think Maya is my slave. I think that I can take Maya and just kind of wrap her around my little finger and make her dance according to my tune. That's the desire of every living entity, right? Right? When a little baby comes into the world, he has his parents wrapped around his little finger. And he thinks that that's how life is going to be. I'm going to move my eyebrows and the whole world will just attend to me and attend to my every single whims, and, my whims and desires are going to be met, but that doesn't happen. So Maya is something that it is not. So now there are two characteristics of this material energy. This is all from Bhagavad Gita. This material energy has two characteristics. One is called the Priksha Atmika energy, and the other is Avaranatmika energy. Avaran means covering. So what happens when you go to a jail? The first thing that happens, and I don't think any one of us have gone to a jail, but I guess the first thing that happens is that your old clothes are taken away and you're given new clothes. So in order for us to enjoy matter, material energy she covers our intelligence. Remember that image that we saw with the chariot, the image of the chariot, where the living entity is like in a state of slumber. He's completely covered. He doesn't know who he is. He hands over all his power to the mind. So that covering potency or power is actually one of the functions of material energy. She covers us. Just like, sometimes you see some people, when they're kidnapped, you see how they're blindfolded and they're walked, to this certain place, totally blindfolded. So they don't know what's happening. So we are blinded by this illusion of this material energy. That's happening because of the power of this material energy, Durga. And then the next thing she does is Priksha Atmika, which means that she throws us. She tosses us in this world and says, okay, here you go. Here you go. And now you try to enjoy to the best of your capacity. So this is actually, it is described in the Bhagavad Purana that Durga Devi feels very embarrassed. She does this work as a thankless task, knowing that her work is really one of trying to rectify. Just like when a child misbehaves, then sometimes the child is handed over to a nanny or to somebody who can, rectify the living entity. So Maya Devi takes on that role of rectifying the rebellious living entities who have forgotten who they are. So here Krishna speaks about the material energy. He says, Devi hesha gunamayi, mama maya durattaya, mam eva ye prapadyante, mayam etam tarantite. He says, this divine energy consisting of the three modes is very difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. This is from Bhagavad Gita 7:14. So when Krishna says it's difficult to overcome, we can accept. What we can hear is that it is impossible to overcome. So now let's talk about these three modes. So gunas. So what is a guna? A guna in Sanskrit means a rope. So what is a rope used for? A rope is used to tie a person. So there are these three gunas. So the material energy actually has these three gunas with which she ties every living entity in this world. And those three ropes are the ropes of Satogun, which means mode of goodness, Rajogun, mode of passion, and Tamogun, the mode of ignorance. Now, if you take like little tiny thin threads and you braid it, right? You braid three, and then you braid it again, and then you braid it again. Then those three can become a very thick rope, right? Those threads, once they are braided, they will become a very thick rope. And it will become such a thick rope that it can actually hold down a huge ship. Even though a ship is very big, massive, and weighs a ton, I don't know how many tons it weighs, but it is actually held down by a rope, which is nothing but braided thread. So in the same way, these three gunas, they're sometimes compared to three colors, but you keep mixing them up. You keep mixing them over and over again, it becomes what, 81? And maybe, and then beyond that. So this is how the living entity, who is actually very powerful, the jiva is actually, because it's a particle of God, it's very powerful. It's eternal. It is full of knowledge, but it is bound down because of these three gunas. I think we've talked about this also, that, you know, in Assam, there are a lot of elephants. And again, same point, that when the elephant is small, then the elephant is tied by a thin thread to a little stick. And that time the thread is enough to hold the elephant down. But once the elephant becomes huge, massive, so powerful it can overthrow a car or a truck, but the elephant is still conditioned to believe that I cannot break this rope, this tiny little stick and this thin little thread. The elephant is convinced that I am supposed to be bound for the rest of my life. So this example is used to illustrate that the living entity also has the full power to become free from the clutches of this material energy. But because the living entity is conditioned to believe that he is trapped, that this is what he's supposed to do, so that's why he never actually is able to become free. Now, there is a famous story of Plato's cave, which is, where, there are these people who are tied by chains and they're watching some images on the wall of the cave. Those images are actually reflection of light. So there's a lot of activity going on outside the cave. And what they are seeing is simply the reflection of those activities. Now, one of those guys, he somehow manages to break free, and he goes out and he sees, oh my God, there is real life here. There's light, there are people, there's real activities. And he comes back and he tells these other guys and he says, hey, there is this other world. And what we are seeing are simply the shadows, just the reflection, the images on this wall. It's actually coming from somewhere else. And those other men who are in chains, they become very angry. They become very angry at this man. They say, why are you trying to disturb our lives? Why are you trying to, speak lies, right? This is it. So that's what happens to the living entities who are conditioned by this material energy because of her covering potency and her throwing potency. That even when we hear about this, we are not able to understand that actually there might be a reality which is completely different from what we are experiencing, or the reality that we are experiencing is an upside down reflection of the real reality, which is somewhere else. So this is what the three modes, this is what it does. All these videos, by the way, I don't want to share this right now. We'll just share it on our WhatsApp or wherever. Please watch it on your own time. It's a really nice video. They actually did an experiment of this man where, he wore glasses. Maybe we'll just share this. We can watch this real quick, but I've been talking for such a long time. It's quite interesting. Huh? I didn't share the sound. Okay, 1 second. Let me share the sound. Where's Oh, I see. Huh? Where am I? Oh, I didn't know this. Okay.
As adults, we take it all for granted. But in Chicago, psychologist Hubert Dolezal has devised a bizarre way to test how well our brains can adjust when everything we've spent years learning is turned on its head. He's built a set of goggles that flip the world upside down.
These goggles, he's seeing everything upside down.
Hello, Hubert. Oh,
Hubert has been wearing his goggles non-stop for 2 weeks now.
And in 2 weeks' time, he gets like conditioned, and he starts thinking that, yeah, this is, this is the world. So that's what has happened to us also. So we already talked about this. I'm not going to get into so much detail here about, this is how the whole Sankhya philosophy of Bhagavatam, where how the false ego, manifest as goodness and passion and ignorance, the three gunas, and how the mind is a product of goodness, intelligence is a product of passion, and all these 5 elements, they're actually product of ignorance. So we already talked about the color wheel. We understand that Satogun has some qualities, balance, harmony, positive, rajas, and tamas. And everything in this world actually can be divided into these 3 modes. Our food can be divided into these 3 modes. Charity can be in 3 modes. Our austerity, our happiness. Some people say, oh, each person to their own. Some people feel happy this way, some people feel happy that way. It's true. But each mode, the kind of happiness you choose, or the kind of mode that you want to associate with when you're trying to find happiness, is going to now impact you. So you come to, our freedom lies in choosing the particular mode that we want to hang out with. But once you hang out with a certain mode, then that mode will then overcome us. So these are verses from the Bhagavad Gita. Please read them on your own time. Happiness derived from the self is in the mode of goodness. Happiness based on sense gratification is in the mode of passion. And happiness based on delusion and degradation is in the mode of ignorance. But that happiness found within me is transcendental. So this is a side point, which is that we're not just looking for happiness in goodness, because goodness is also a rope, by the way. Some people say, oh, just do good, just be a good person. But the Bhagavad Gita actually comes in and says, well, good is not good enough, because it's still a rope that binds us. So mode of goodness will also bind us to a sense of false happiness. Ultimately, we are still functioning in Maya's kingdom, where we may be elevated to a higher platform of, say, going to the heavenly planets. Like in India, people really think, oh, I'm going to ascend to the heavens, the Swarga Loka. In other traditions, there might be some understanding of paradise or whatever, but that's still within that 25% of this material universe. And the living entity is still bound by time and space. Krishna says, Brahma Bhuvana Loka. He says, from the topmost planet down to the lowest planet, all these places are places of misery. There might be, like you can go to Hawaii and get better weather, or you can be in Chicago, or you can be in Delhi right now, which is probably very hot. So yeah, you can go to a better place, but that place is also temporary. And so, just going to skip this. So then the question may come up that we talked about so many different things, that what's the way out? So the first thing that we can understand is that we must, if we can learn to see this material energy as a divine energy, not meant for my exploitation, not meant for my enjoyment, but rather as an opportunity for me to engage this world of matter in the service of God and in the service of everyone. Then that same energy actually converts into spiritual energy. That same Durga, Mahamaya, another name for Durga is Mahamaya, she becomes Yoga Maya. Yoga Maya means, yoga means connection. Instead of being a correctional energy, she becomes a connecting energy, which means that she helps us connect with the Supreme Person. And instead of being temporary, instead of being full of miseries, instead of her, seeing that trident with which she's trying to push us back, she actually opens up a whole other portal where we can experience real knowledge, real happiness, and real eternal existence. In fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, a Mahatma is actually described as someone who is under the shelter of this Devi Shakti. Anybody who is under the shelter of this divine energy of Krishna or God is actually considered to be a Mahatma. So that, because if you remember, we started our discussion with this idea that a living entity has the freedom to choose, to decide whether I want to be under the material energy or I want to be under spiritual energy. That's the only freedom we have. Once we make that choice, once we say, okay, material energy, I want to enjoy and I want to be under your control, then material energy's control is stringent. She's like this strict nanny who will now take us under her belt to correct us. But that same energy, if we say to spiritual energy, who are, by the way, they're considered also like a shadow in substance. So when we look towards spiritual energy, then her approach or her response to a living entity is a loving, warm embrace and engaging us in her service. And that's the realm where one can actually experience real happiness, that happiness that we are looking for. We're looking for the right thing in the wrong place, and then she will reunite us, she'll reconnect us. So then the question might be, how do I, so this is a question, this is a little, I'll just read it. An old Cherokee is teaching his grandson about life. A fight is going on inside, he said to the boy. It's a terrible fight, and it is between two wolves. One is evil, his anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity. And the other is good, his joy, peace, spiritual understanding. So the same fight within us, we have these two, the living entities pulled in these two different directions. So then the grandson, so he asked this question to his father, that who will win? And the old Cherokee simply replied, the one you feed. So what we are doing right now, coming together once a week and talking about spiritual subject matter. And I know some of you have requested a daily association, so we are going to also start that. But this is the way we can actually overcome these modes. This is how, by feeding, the soul with spiritual vibration, spiritual sound, the living entity revives its old forgotten connection with spirit and lets go of this addiction to matter, which is ultimately, it always causes us distress. So these are all different verses. So here is another verse from Bhagavad Gita. Mam choya abhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. So how do you now overcome these gunas, these ropes? How do you become free from these gunas? It is by engaging in full devotional service. Bhakti yogena sevate. So now, how do you engage in bhakti yoga? This might be a natural question. You engage in bhakti yoga through the process of spiritual sound. So hearing spiritual subject matter, shravanam. There are different ways, but it starts with shravana and then kirtana. So those are the two ways that one can overcome the stringent material energy, which Krishna, by the way, says, durattaya. He says, very difficult to overcome, impossible to overcome. But that one can easily overcome if one simply tries to take shelter of Krishna's spiritual energy and tries to absorb one's consciousness in spiritual vibration. So this is what we talked about today. What is this material world? Why is it created? What are the forces? How these forces affect us? And finally, how to become free from these forces. Okay, so I guess I'll take reflections and questions and comments.
I really liked to hear that whichever you feed is what wins over you.
Yes.
And we all know that. Still, it's just so difficult. I don't know if the human mind is made up that way, that, you know, evil things or things that are easy to achieve, it just lures towards it. And we have to keep pulling ourselves to say, no, that's not the way you want to go.
Exactly. Yeah. There are patterns in our brain, they're called samskaras. Just like when you see on the earth, there are these channels that are made and the water will just flow through that. That's how you have rivers and streams, right? So same thing in our head, over lifetimes, we have formed these channels in our consciousness and our consciousness will just flow towards matter. So the whole process of spiritual practice, sadhana, is to reclaim that, and it starts with determination, like making that initial sankalpa or determination that I would really like to now finally become free from the clutches of this material energy. And once we do that, then the road opens and we take steps, and along the way we are helped. And one thing that Loka and we have found is a daily practice is the most powerful thing. Even just like, sometimes you go, there's so many places you go, you see like there's a drop of water, like you have these Luray caverns, right? Like drops of water, they're falling, and over the years they become these beautiful formations. So same way, even if it's just a tiny drop every day, then those drops, they accumulate and they change the pattern of our thinking, and we become our natural responses, they change over a period of time. So I think that is the way to do it. It's not just an overnight thing, it's not instant self-realization, but it just requires this just patient, determined, steady, daily practice. It's possible. Thank you very much. Yes, Maharshi.
Hello. I liked your presentation today, and it was really good, and I learned a lot. The past few weeks I had signed up for this course a long time ago, or maybe my mom signed me up, but but I had a lot of exams, so I missed the material. So how can I catch up? And also, if I want to learn more, and be more knowledgeable and follow my practice, then how can I do that? Apart from, let's say I recently started sky breathing.
Okay.
I want to do that consistently. And I'm attending this lecture, but I like to read, so maybe I can read a book or something. Do you have any suggestion?
Yeah, the Bhagavad Gita, we can read that together. In fact, I mean, that's one thing that I'm hearing a lot from everyone is everyone wants like a daily practice. Actually, I just came to the DC, so I'm a little bit, but yeah, maybe this week or next week, we will maybe send out an email and let's just start a daily practice. So maybe half an hour of just coming together where we will read a verse from the Bhagavad Gita, and then we can teach you how to engage in a daily meditation practice, mantra meditation practice. And so that might be something that may be very, very helpful if you think you're interested. Yeah, Geeta is saying that would be really helpful. So yes, where are you based in, Maharshi? Where are you from?
I'm in Connecticut. I'm in southwestern Connecticut, near the border. Yes.
Okay. And what are you studying?
Studying economics.
Oh, great, wonderful. Okay, so yeah, we'll put something together. We're thinking like for you guys, it would be like later in the night, so like 8:30 in the evening after you guys are done with your day, and then just ending the day. Would that work for you?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Like I was thinking that for you guys, it could be later in the day, like in the evening, like after 7:30 or 8 o'clock.
Okay, it can work for me.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So. Yeah, so please send us. Do we have your information? Do we have your email?
Oh, yes, I think so. I received an email from you and this morning I would join the group.
Husband is here. 1 second.
Please send us your email address because
he already is receiving.
But I don't know what his email address is.
Oh, we don't know what your email address is.
Yeah, we can send you the previous contact.
Yeah, maybe you can also put it on the chat here so that Amrita can collect it. For India, it will be morning time. That's what we are thinking. So for India, it will be morning, and for the US, it would be evening.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the email. How do I save this? Okay. Anybody else? Any other comments or thoughts before we end?
Loka hasn't spoken today.
I know. He had a meeting.
I had a couple of meetings going on parallelly, so I was in and out. I didn't break up. How is everybody doing?
Yeah, fine.
Hi,
Thank you.
Amitabh. Is it very hot in Delhi right now?
No, I'm in Delhi.
Yeah, is it very hot there?
Sorry.
Is it very hot there?
Fortunately, it has been quite nice in last few days. I think from today onwards, it has started getting a little hot.
Okay.
But till yesterday, it was actually
Okay. No, that's good. Yeah, here in DC, the weather is kind of up and down. We get a lot of allergies right now. I'm going through allergy, so pollen allergy.
okay. When are you coming back?
Probably end of June.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we can end here.
Yeah.
Thank you so